I never told my grandmother I found the unsent letters she wrote to her first love because, when she looked at me across the kitchen one morning and said, "Some goodbyes are too big for words," I realized that she had already said everything she needed to, just not to the people who needed to hear it most. I'm Jack. I'm 36. I live in Dayton, Ohio, in the same house my grandmother owned for more than 50 years. I moved back after my mom died of cancer, mostly to help take care of Grandma Lorraine. She didn't ask me to. She didn't really need me to, but she never said no either. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste words. Her love was quiet. Making your favorite dinner without asking. Folding your shirts even when you told her not to. She hummed when she cleaned, played solitaire at the kitchen table, and went to bed at the same time every night for as long as I could remember. It wasn't until the last few years that I noticed she'd sometimes stare off when certain names were mentioned. Mostly ones from her past. And one name always stopped her cold. Everett Shaw. The name didn't come up often. Once in a while, in an old story about her teenage years, she'd say something vague like, "He used to walk me home," or, "He had this laugh that didn't match his face." That was it. She never said if he was a boyfriend or a friend. But when she said his name, she always paused like something in her chest needed to catch up with her mouth. After she passed, I had to go through her things. No one else left. My mom was gone. My Uncle Steve ran off years ago. The whole house felt heavier without her in it. The kitchen still smelled like Maxwell House and cinnamon. The radio still played that same station she listened to since I was a kid. I started cleaning out her room first. It felt wrong, like touching someone's memories with dirty hands, but I didn't know where else to begin. Most of her things were what you'd expect: old clothes, picture frames, church bulletins tucked in drawers. But in the back of her closet, beneath a loose floorboard, I found a green shoebox. I didn't even know what I was looking at when I opened it. There were stacks of letters, all the same size, all folded neatly, yellowed with time. Some had little dried flowers pressed between the pages. Not one had a stamp. Not one had ever been mailed. The first letter was dated May 12, 1953. "Dear Everett, I heard from someone you didn't come back. I hope they're wrong. I don't know how to believe it yet, so I won't. I made your mother's pie last week. It didn't taste right." She wrote him for years. The tone of her letters shifted over time. In the early ones, she begged him to write back. She told him about her job at the diner, about her sister's wedding, about how her dad stopped speaking for weeks after the telegram came. But then the letters turned quieter. Sadder. She talked about her wedding to my grandfather, Ed. About how she didn't love him the way she loved Everett. How she tried. How it wasn't enough. One line stuck with me: "Sometimes I pretend you died in a way that kept you beautiful in my mind." She talked about my mom's birth and about a miscarriage no one in the family ever mentioned. She wrote about days when she wanted to leave everything and drive west. About dreams she had where Everett showed up at her door, wet from the rain, and told her he got the letters. The last letter was dated 1983. That night, I didn't sleep. I just kept rereading the letters, trying to understand how someone could carry that kind of pain for decades. And why no one in the family ever talked about it. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen like I always did. She was sitting at the table, holding her coffee, watching the birds. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Some goodbyes are too big for words," she said, quiet and calm, like she was commenting on the weather. I froze. I don't even think I responded. I wanted to ask her what she meant, if she knew I had found the letters. But something in her face told me not to, like she'd already said all she ever would. She died 2 weeks later, peacefully, sitting in that same chair by the window. Her coffee was still warm. I kept the letters. I didn't tell anyone about them, but something started gnawing at me. Couldn't let it go. I needed to know more about Everett, about what really happened, why he never got the letters, why he never came back for her, if he loved her like she clearly loved him. So I did what people do now. I Googled, and what I found made my stomach twist. Everett Shaw didn't die in Korea. He came home in 1954, alive, healthy. Lived 2 counties over, in Springfield. He married a woman named Dorothy, had 3 kids, ran a small carpentry business, and died in 2001. He lived a full life, just not with my grandmother. But that wasn't even the worst part. Dorothy Shaw, his wife, her maiden name was Morris. My grandfather Ed's sister, which meant Everett didn't just vanish. He came home. He married into the same family that told my grandmother he died in the war. He was close. All those years. Just a couple of hours away. And no one ever told her. I started pulling at every thread I could find. Old military records. Family photos. Obituaries. Church rosters. I even drove to Springfield to see if anyone remembered him. I talked to people who knew him in the 70s and 80s. Nice guy, they said. Quiet. Kept to himself. The more I dug, the more the story bent in ways I didn't expect. And the angrier I got. Someone lied. Someone told my grandmother a story that broke her. And I was going to find out who. I didn't know where to start, so I started with my Uncle Steve. He was a drunk and a coward, but he knew things. Even when I was a kid, he'd say stuff like, "Your grandma wasn't always so cold, you know," or "Back then, everything was about saving face." I called him in Florida. He didn't answer. I tried again the next day, and he finally picked up. Slurred his words like he always did. Said he was at a bar called Jerry's Pit Stop and asked if I could call back after 9. I didn't wait. I got in my car the next morning and drove down. Took me 14 hours. I didn't care. When I walked into Jerry's Pit Stop, he was sitting at the bar, red-faced, sunburnt, older than I remembered. When he saw me, he flinched like I was someone he owed money to. "Jack," he said, blinking hard. "You look like hell." "You look like you stopped caring about yourself 10 years ago," I shot back. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. I just sat down and ordered a water. I showed him one of the letters. The shortest one. It was from 1956, right after Grandma married Ed. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "Shit." That was it. One word. Then he downed the rest of his drink and looked over his shoulder like someone might be watching. "You shouldn't have read those," he said. I did. And I know about Everett. I know he didn't die. I know he married Ed's sister. So tell me, who lied to her? Steve didn't answer right away. He rubbed his face with both hands, sighed deep. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," he said. "It was a dumb plan. A lie told at the wrong time." "What plan?" He looked at me like I was 10 years old again. "Your grandpa," he said slowly, "wasn't a good man back then. Not with Lorraine. She was in love with Everett and Ed knew it. Everyone did. But Ed wanted her anyway. And when Everett got drafted, Ed made his move. I waited." Steve shook his head. "When we heard Everett was missing in action, Ed said we should tell her he died. Said it would give her closure. Said she needed to move on. I was just a kid. I didn't think it would stick. But Ed, he told her himself. And she believed him? She didn't want to, but there was no way to confirm anything back then. She kept hoping. For months. Maybe longer. But Ed kept pushing. Said she was wasting her life on a ghost." Then Steve's voice got lower. "I found out years later that Everett did write back. At least once." My jaw clenched. "What do you mean?" "I found a letter once. In the garage. It had Everett's name on it. I opened it. He was asking why she never wrote him. Said he came back and couldn't find her." "Where is it?" I asked. "I don't have it." "What do you mean, you don't have it?" "Ed saw me with it and ripped it up. Said it would confuse her." That was when I stood up. My hands were shaking. My breath came short. "You let her live her whole life thinking he died." Steve nodded, shame on his face but no apology in his voice. He was scared she'd leave him if she knew the truth. And maybe she would've. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. I got in my car and sat behind the wheel for over an hour before I could even turn the engine on. When I got back to Dayton, I drove straight to the cemetery. I sat next to Grandma's headstone and read her one of the letters out loud. The one where she said she still dreamed about the lake they used to go to. Then I said something I never thought I would. "I'm going to make this right." I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew where I had to go next. I had to find Dorothy, Everett's wife, the woman who got the life my grandmother was supposed to have. Dorothy Shaw was still alive. 91 years old. Living in a small assisted living facility outside Springfield. I found her through a public record search, then confirmed it by calling the facility and pretending to be a distant relative doing a genealogy project. I didn't sleep the night before I went. I kept thinking about what I'd say, if she even remembered. if she was part of the lie or just another piece of it. The place smelled like lemon cleaner and wilted flowers. The receptionist pointed me to a garden out back. Dorothy was there, sitting in a shaded area, reading a Bible with pages that looked like they'd been turned 1,000,000 times. She looked up as I approached. Her face didn't change, but her eyes did. Just a flicker of something, a recognition, maybe? "Dorothy Shaw?" I asked. She nodded, cautious. "Yes. My name is Jack. Lorraine's grandson. Lorraine Morris." She blinked like she hadn't heard that name in years. Slowly closed the Bible and rested it on her lap. "She was my sister-in-law," she said. "Years ago." I sat down across from her. "I found the letters." She didn't say anything, just stared at me, calm but sharp. She was still all there. Nothing foggy about her. "Letters Everett wrote to her?" she asked, voice low. I shook my head. Letters she wrote to him. Dozens. From 53 to 83. All unsent. She looked away, toward the flowers. "He loved her," she said, "until the day he died." That hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed hard. "Then why did he marry you?" She smiled, a sad, tired smile. "Because she disappeared. That's what he said. That she just stopped. No letters. No calls. He said it was like she vanished. He waited 2 years before he gave up. She never knew he came home." Dorothy nodded slowly. "I always suspected something wasn't right," she said. "He was never whole with me. We had a good life, but it wasn't the life he wanted. He talked in his sleep sometimes. Said her name more times than he said mine." I leaned forward. "Did you know he wrote to her?" "I didn't. Not until after he died. I found a letter tucked into a book in his workshop. It was dated 1954. He wrote that he came home early, that he went to her house and her father told him she had moved on, that she was marrying Ed." I froze. "Her father told him that?" Dorothy looked at me. "Yes, that's what the letter said. So it wasn't just my grandfather. It was her father, too. My great-grandfather. He must have wanted her with Ed more than he cared about her happiness." "They buried it," I said. "They buried him from her life." Dorothy nodded. "He carried that pain quietly. Maybe they thought they were protecting her. Maybe they were protecting themselves." I stood up. My hands were shaking again. "Thank you," I said. She reached out and touched my arm. She should have known. If I could go back, I'd tell her myself. I walked out of there knowing what I had to do next. It wasn't about Everett anymore. It was about exposing every lie that kept my grandmother silent for 50 years. And one name kept flashing in my head, Ruth Morris. My great-aunt. Ed's cousin. The last one still alive from that generation besides Dorothy. She was 94, and she never liked my grandmother. If anyone knew the whole truth and chose to keep it buried, it was her. Ruth Morris lived in a white house with blue shutters on a quiet street in Kettering. Same place she'd lived since the 60s. Her mind was sharp, even at 94. I'd seen her at family funerals, sitting stiff in a corner like a judge waiting for someone to lie. I showed up unannounced. She opened the door herself. "Well," she said, frowning, "the prodigal grandson. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to talk," I said. "About Lorraine. About Everett." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't move aside. "Don't stir things that were meant to settle, Jack." But I didn't back down. I met her stare head-on. "I know about the letters," I said. "I know she never stopped loving him. I know you all lied to her. I just want to know why." She hesitated. Then she stepped back. Inside, everything smelled like lavender and dust. Doilies on the arms of every chair. She motioned for me to sit, but I stayed standing. She sat down and looked up at me. "Your grandmother was headstrong," she said. "Too much heart, not enough sense. Everyone knew she'd marry Everett. Until she didn't. Because you told him she was marrying Ed." She smiled bitter. "Because your great-grandfather and Ed made sure of it." She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. Just nodded like she was reading from a script. "They decided Everett wasn't a good match. Per family. No land. And Ed was already set to inherit the hardware store. It was practical. So when Everett came back early, well, they told him Lorraine had moved on. That she'd fallen for Ed. And she hadn't. No. But they knew she would if she thought Everett was dead." My stomach turned. So you let her live a whole life believing she lost him in war. She loved a fantasy, Ruth said. You think the kind of love survives time? Marriage? Children? Pain? She needed something to hold onto. So we gave her a story. I stepped forward. You stole her life. You robbed both of them. She looked tired. Maybe she knew what was coming. I pulled the box of letters from my bag and dropped it on her table. They spilled out. Years of ink and heartbreak. She wrote to him for 30 years. They both died thinking they were abandoned. For the first time, Ruth's hands trembled. I stood over her. I'm going to make sure every one of these letters is read. By every family member. Every friend. I'm going to post them online. In local history groups. At the War Museum. I'll publish them in the damn newspaper if I have to. You wouldn't. I will, I said. You spent your life hiding the truth. I'm going to spend the rest of mine making sure everyone knows it. She didn't cry, but she didn't stop me either. Over the next 3 months, I did exactly what I promised. I scanned every letter, made a website, shared them with war history circles. A local journalist wrote an article titled, "The Soldier Who Wasn't Lost, but Was Still Never Found." Family members called me. Some angry, some in tears. Most had no idea. My grandfather Ed's name became mud. His legacy at the hardware store vanished. No one wanted to be connected to the lie. As for me, I moved out of that house. Couldn't stay there anymore. Too many ghosts. But I kept one thing. A bench plaque in the city park right by the old lake where Lorraine and Everett used to go. It says, "Some goodbyes are too big for words, so I wrote them anyway." Lorraine, and underneath, in smaller letters, Everett Shaw, 1930 to 2001. Loved and never forgotten. I never knew Everett, but I know what it means to love someone through silence. And I know what happens when you finally speak. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just truth, spoken louder than the lies ever were.